What's going on, everybody? It's the FF Mediators, and I'm joined as always by Coach Tyler. My name's Matt, and today we're going to walk through some contender trade targets for our fantasy football teams. There's several names on here that we think apply to both redraft and dynasty leagues. So if you're looking to contend and go grab that title, here's some names you need to be looking out for. And, I want to start by saying, as always, you need to be evaluating your team weekly. You need to be honest and be sure to know whether you are competing or whether you're rebuilding, or if this is redraft, you're going for the title no matter what. So we're going to go through some names that we're thinking about in the back of our heads and who we might go get. So, Coach, I'm going to kick to you first. If you're out there and you're hunting for a wide receiver, what's a name you're looking for?
Man, I really like Debo Samuel. I mean, to me, Debo's the number one wide receiver in San Fran. Like the dude is just premium player. You saw what he did last night on the Thursday night game. I mean, the guy can really play. His value is kind of mid. Like some people are in love with Ayuk for some reason. I don't understand why. Juwan Jennings has played well, but Debo's been a little banged up. So now's a good chance to go out and get Debo, and he'll really help you down the stretch when it matters.
Yeah, and I think in Dynasty his value's below a first, so he's someone you can move that second and maybe an extra piece and go grab him for your team and really change your wide receiver room. Tyler, what about you? Is there a wide receiver you're hunting?
I think for me right now, probably one that I would kind of want to target is Chris Godwin. The reason I say that, we're recording this before Week 6, um, right before they play the Saints. We know how that goes between Lattimore and Mike Evans. Seems like Mike Evans has a track record of getting kicked out of those
Fight,
games.
fight, fight, fight.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think Godwin's going to have a huge game this week. He's done well out of the slot all year where they've moved him back to. I think definitely somebody you could buy low on, especially if you're contending, get some depth or a starter for you.
Yeah, I mean, Godwin moving to the slot has been absolutely revitalizing his game, and he's someone's just as Debo Samuel. You can get him for less than a first. I think you can throw a second and, a bench player you have or a vet wide receiver or someone like that and really change your roster. For me, a name I'm locked watching is DK Metcalf. I mean, I just traded for him in a league around a first and a second value, and, wasn't the best week on Thursday night, but could have been if that touchdown would have counted. Would have been a really big night. And let's jump to some other positions here. So if you're a contender, like we always say, you need to be buying points. You want to fill out your roster as much as you can. And the running backs, we're losing them left and right all the time. So, Coach, I'll start with you. Is there a name out there that's a running back that's someone you're interested in having?
I mean, James Conner is a guy I'm really high on. I liked him early in the season. He continues to get tons of carries there in Arizona. I mean, they're going to keep feeding that guy the ball. His value's low considering his age. Like he's a guy you can probably get for a second right now, especially from a team that's struggling. So I would go out and buy James Conner, and he's going to help you throughout the season. I mean, he's got 83 carries on the season already. He's also been catching the ball out of the backfield a little more this year as well.
Yeah, and like you said, you can get him for a second, and I think there's a world in some leagues if it's on a bad team, you might be able to get him for like 2/3, and that's a huge change to your roster. You're buying the points, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to win, and he's a plug and play guy right now. So I think that's great for your roster, and if this is redraft too, he's going to help you as well. Tyler, what about you? What running back are you after?
So I was trying to look through stats as I was thinking here. I think one that's kind of sneaky is Chuba Hubbard from the Panthers. You're talking about somebody who, in a half point PPR format, he is currently ninth on the year. He's averaging 62% of snaps. He's not scored a lot of touchdowns, but he's got the work. Volume wise, he's there. We're not really worried about anybody until Jonathan Brooks comes back. And then, like we're talking about price, he's cheap. He's cheap as all get out at this point. Like maybe 2/3, maybe.
I think you can even get him for less than that.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's definitely not much. And he's a starter for a team. Granted, they're not great, but he's a starter. He's got the usage. I really think as somebody, if you're looking for a safe floor that you're trying to get some depth, I think he's the player to go after.
Yeah, and like I said, I think you can just spend a third on Chuba. Um, he's averaging over 5 yards a carry for the last 4 weeks. He's hit 100 yards in week 3 and week 4. Week 5, he had 97 yards. So basically 100 yards. Week 2, he had 64 yards and he averaged 6.4 yards per carry. So the guy is moving the ball down the field. Like you said, the touchdowns, I don't know how often they're going to come for Chuba in Carolina. And you have Brooks looming over your shoulder. Coaches, is Chuba someone that you're interested in?
Yeah, especially in the short term, like especially if I need wins immediately, then I
Hmm.
really would be interested in getting Hubbard. Like I don't really know what's going to happen with Jonathan Brooks. You could make the case that Hubbard's played so well that he's going to keep being the workhorse. You know, he'll probably get 2/3 of the carries the rest of the way unless something crazy happens. So, I mean, I really like Chuba, especially in the short term.
Yeah, and sometimes these teams hold players that are on IR until the bye week and bring them back after the bye
Mhm.
week. The Panthers' bye week is week 11, so we've got some time. And like you said, if you're a contending team, and let's say you started off, you're 1-4, you need to buy a win. Like you need a win
Mhm.
right now. So I would send my third for Chuba Hubbard to start him if I needed a running back. So I don't think that's crazy at all. Myself, I've been saying Alvin Kamara in the offseason. I still stand by Alvin Kamara. I know there's a little bit of injury scare there right now, but as far as it goes for him, he's putting up fantasy points. He just does it every single year. It feels like he doesn't
Mhm.
fall off at all. He just bounces off everything and is constantly moving around. Tyler, are you interested in Alvin Kamara at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've got him at least on one team that I can think of off the top of my head in a dynasty league where I'm contending, and he's still that workhorse back. I don't know if it has to do with his training regimen of pulling jeeps and stuff that we watched from years ago, but still looks good. We've got the concerns as far as Spencer Rattler being the quarterback versus Derek Carr, but that could also be a good thing too. Typically, rookie quarterbacks or young quarterbacks tend to check down a lot. He could be the outlet there, so we might see some PPR value go up. Before we get coach's opinion, if out of the three guys we just mentioned, between Chuba, Kamara, and Connor, if you had to rank the three for the rest of the season, as far as who you would go after right now, how do you guys rank those?
Coach, I'll let you go first.
Probably Kamara, Connor, Chuba in that order for me. Now, you're going to have to pay more for Kamara than you have to pay for the other two guys, too. His value has came down somewhat the last 2 weeks just because the offense has sputtered a little bit. But, I mean, you're still going to pay more for him than you are the other two guys. But I would definitely prefer to have him.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I would rank them in the exact same order. Um, you know, Can you get Chuba cheaper? Yes, no doubt. I think Connor's a little bit cheaper than Kamara, like you said. But I think all three are great plays. Kamara, I think, is going to be a good play this week because Taysom Hill's out, and so you're not going to have to deal with the vulturing at the goal line. So it's interesting to me. Coach, do you have any final thoughts on Kamara before we move on?
No, I mean, in Dynasty, your only concern is his age a little bit, but the guy can play. He's going to keep producing. I mean, I would love to have him on my team.
Yeah. And some other names just for the rookies because we're talking about running backs. We can't not do it. Tyron Tracy's out there. He played very well last week. Only running back all season to have positive yardage on every single one of his attempts. He went 18 for 18, rushed the ball great vision, good balance. Bucky Irving, I have to say it, he's looked great all season. Looking like Rashad White's not going to play this year or this week, excuse me. So it's going to be interesting to see him be the RB1 for that team, which he already is. But we'll move on from running backs and let's jump into tight ends here, Coach. I'm going to let you kick us off first because I know you've got a name that you've been screaming from the mountaintops for a long time.
Man, I am a big Jake Ferguson guy and still am. So, Jake Ferguson is fifth in targets amongst fantasy tight ends. And at the same time, he's played it one game less than all the guys above him. Like, we're still there. Like, he's 6 targets less than Brock Bowers. Like, you can go get this guy relatively cheap, and he hasn't even gotten the end zone yet. Like, I mean, this guy can really produce for you. He's going to get in the end zone. Dak's going to keep throwing him the ball. He's still the second option. He's getting a ton of targets. I mean, him and McBride are tied at 30 targets apiece, and they both have played 4 games where everybody else has played 5. I mean, Jake Ferguson's a guy that you can probably go out there and get for a second-round pick, and you're crazy if you don't try to do it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with the value. I think a second is Jake Ferguson, especially if he's on a bad team or a tanking team. Go get him now because he's going to be involved with Dallas and he's going to score a ton of points. I know Tyler likes Ferguson too a little bit. So why don't you give us your thoughts on him and then hit us with the tight end you're chasing?
Okay. So I think Jake Ferguson, I think he, definitely has a role to play in that offense. Those target numbers, like 6 targets behind Brock Bowers, that's an interesting stat. I didn't know he was up that high. Like I said, him being probably what second fiddle in that offense, he's definitely got a lot of value built in that maybe isn't accounted for. So that second round pick value is definitely interesting. Somebody that we've talked about in one of our other tight end videos that has kind of rose here lately is Tucker Craft. Um, he's started looking good here in the last few weeks. Luke Musgrave just went on IR. I think as long as he can stay healthy, he's got the role to himself. And we like the Packers offense, so I think he could definitely compete for targets there. At this point, with tight ends, you're chasing the points. You're hoping for a touchdown and just not to get goosed. So, what about you, Matt?
Yeah, I think Tucker Craft is really interesting. He's someone I tried to trade for, even with you, Tyler. Tight end 1 this past week, week 5, tight end 2 in week 4. He's dominated snap percentage all year. The targets, 9 targets in week 4, 5 targets last week. So they're going up. It's a good offense. He's going to be involved, and he's just a playmaker. Like he just seems to make plays all the time. So he's a buy for me. Can you get him? It's going to be tough just given the landscape of the tight ends. And, people are going to probably not want to move him. But if you have a tanking team and you can kind of convince them to do it, I'm all for it. For me, I'm going to say some names that probably will surprise people and might even surprise both of you. I might go buy Evan Ingram and I might buy Mark Andrews. I just think given the situations and the players that we know they are, surely it's got to get better. And if you're dying and hunting for a tight end, you might as well take the shot. I mean, if I'm sitting here fighting, do I want to start Noah Fant or Mark Andrews? You might as well start Mark Andrews just because it probably is just going to end up being a wash anyways. So, and their value is so low right now. Like I think you can trade for them for a third in some places, and that's just crazy to me. Coach,
Yeah, I
do you
love
have
the
any
Evan
interest in
Ingram
them?
one.
Yeah.
I love that Evan Ingram one. I mean, he's been hurt. I mean, he's a guy everybody sort of forgot about. He's 30 years old. I mean, it's a guy that really could pay big dividends for you down the stretch for cheap. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and you know what too? He dominated in the preseason. And I get it's preseason, but he had one game with like 2 touchdowns. He had a touchdown in another game, I believe, and a bunch of targets. I mean, I say a bunch, but it was for the few series that the starters play, he was felt like the focal point. So I'm
Mhm.
totally interested in Ingram, especially if you can get him really cheap right now. Tyler, do you have interest in either one of those, or do you have a preference?
Out of those two, I would definitely be more interested in Ingram. Um, the main reason, like you said, he looked good in the preseason. Let's also not forget last year. Like he was vying for some record-breaking potential, maybe with the targets there. They were feeding him the ball like crazy those last few weeks. Um, so he is a focal point of that offense. I think at this point he's at least the second option there behind probably Brian Thomas Jr. Nobody else has really shocked me or like surprised me from there. Not even Christian Kirk. ETN's looked okay, but we've got Bigsby coming in now. So I think once Ingram comes back, I think that connection that he has with T Law, I think it's going to kind of get reestablished, and he probably surprised a few people.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned his targets last year. He had 143. 143 targets. He had 114 receptions. That's just an insane amount of targets and volume in an offense. But we'll wrap it up here. If you're contending or you believe you're a contending team, make sure you're careful with your picks. You need to have some pick security. So before you move your first, make sure you know you're going to be a contender and you can push for that title. But that's going to do it for us. So be sure to follow us on X at the FF Mediators. Like the video, subscribe on YouTube, comment below who's your dynasty buys, who's your redraft buys. Are any of these players in your agreement? Do you disagree? Let us know your thoughts. You can catch us live every Wednesday at 8:30 on the Faceoff Sports Network and on our channels for a live video where we answer your questions. You can also catch us on X every Thursday night at the halftime of whatever game is on, and you can join our space, ask your questions, give us your thoughts, and we're just talking fantasy football. But until then, we will see you then, guys.